Welcome back to Birching in the West. I'm your host, Eldon Stahl, with the show where we talk about everything related to being an educational activist, sometimes called a Bircher, with the John Birch Society, trying to educate everybody on all aspects of liberty and organize them. We have a very special guest with us today. His name is Mike Kosters. He's just come on fairly recently, I believe, as the coordinator with the John Birch Society in Arizona and New Mexico. So if you have friends that are in that area, have them talk with Mike. But wanted to welcome you, Mike, and thank you for coming on the show.
Well, good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. Well, so I understand, Mike, you've been able to have some success or make some inroads. A lot of our viewers and our listeners are going to be, of course, aware of this all of 2020. We've gone through all these different mandates from the government saying you can't do this, you got to stay home, you got to wear this, you got to, I don't know, jump through a hoop of fire, or I don't know what we're going to do to try to please them. But I'd like to get kind of your take and your experience on what has worked, maybe what hasn't worked, in trying to push back on some of these mandates. And so take it away.
Well, righty.
As I say, yeah.
Yes, what you said is absolutely correct. And just to kind of give a background a little bit, I think first what I'd like to say is it's not just me. I have two section leaders, Don O'Daniel and Harold Stratling, that we would not have been able to accomplish what we've accomplished thus far without the team. And that's one of the things that when I became active with the JBS in this role, that's one of the things that I found right away, and it has been invaluable, is to have good people to work with, and they certainly are. And so, I appreciate their efforts in making a lot of this come to fruition with me. There have been, over the last few months, two primary priorities in my region and the Arizona, New Mexico region that we've been working on. There are two statutes, one in each state. In Arizona, it's called Statute 36-787. And in New Mexico, it's New Mexico Statute 1978. They're nearly the same bill, or the same law, rather, the same statute, I should say properly. And I'll drill down on that in just a second. The second priority is election reform. Republican, Democrat, that's not the issue. The issue is to have voting occur constitutionally according to what the Constitution, the law of the land, mandates. And so those are the two things that we've been working on. And I believe that the primary focus, and correct me if I'm wrong, Eldon, you kind of want to stick with the mandates with regard to business closures, masks, all this kind of stuff. And we can touch on the election reform if you want, but is my presumption correct?
I'd be happy to talk about election reform too, if you'd like.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, why don't we start with the statutes first, and then
Okay.
we can kind of move into that if you like, or
Sure.
I'm an open book, so.
Okay.
Okay. Firstly, the process. I was in my office, and I always, or very often, I have the news channels on in the background, and I could not figure out how in Arizona Governor Ducey believed that he had the right to point at a private business and shut it down, or a church or a synagogue or what have you. And that a bar, for instance, is an essential business. but or something that is not. It was just ridiculous to me.
Yeah.
I've read the U.S. Constitution actually more than once, and
Wow.
I've not seen the supposed right of the governor or of any of these governors listed anywhere in the U.S. Constitution. So, as a matter of fact, Eldon, as you and I both know, and I'm sure most of our viewers know, the Constitution constrains government authority. It doesn't enable more of it. And so I recalled, as I was listening to this stuff on the television, I recalled hearing Governor Ducey mention on several occasions Arizona Statute 36. And we're allowed to give personal opinions on here, right?
Sure.
Okay. Well, my personal opinion is that our governor's not the brightest bulb on the tree. So, again, personal opinion. But
I just moved from Montana, so what can you say?
Well, I'll tell you, I gathered that the New Mexico governor was a little more clever with New Mexico Statute 1978, because I didn't hear her banding that around all over the place, you know. While in Arizona, Governor Ducey was practically advertising his authority under 36-787. So when I drilled down on 36-787, I was, to be frank about it, I was appalled. You know, my section leader and several of our chapter leaders, we got the wording and we reviewed it. And what we found out was that under a state of emergency, and that's the crux of this whole thing, under state of emergency, the governor has frankly unconstitutional powers that have been granted in this statute for these mandates that we've talked about, business closures, et cetera. But furthermore, it provides for forced vaccinations upon the citizenry. And I was shocked because although we've had some comeuppance here recently, we've you know, Arizona is viewed as a pretty constitutionally abiding state, you know. And so I was very surprised by this. And there's no provisions for this whatsoever in the U.S. Constitution. Now, additionally, what we found out in our research on this statute, and again, New Mexico 1978 is virtually the same thing, in some areas worded almost identically to the Arizona Statute 36. So a few additional provisions is that the governor may ration medications. And that's any medication. So let me throw out an example here. We're in Arizona and New Mexico, we're still under a Wuhan virus state of emergency, right?
Yeah.
As every other state is. Okay. The way that statute 36-787 is written is that the governor can ration any medication. So ostensibly, the governor under a Wuhan virus state of emergency, the governor can ration your heart medication or your pain medication or your MS medication, or it doesn't even have to do with the stated state of emergency, which to me was, I couldn't believe that.
So the governor becomes your pharmacist.
Yeah, or your doctor, or
Your
yes,
doctor.
that's right. Yeah, that's right. I don't know what the governors of either New Mexico or Arizona, I don't know what their credentials are in that regard. But their potential lack of credentials in that area makes me a little nervous about them regulating my heart medication. So, and when I read this, I almost had a heart attack, and I'm not on heart medication. So,
right.
A second provision is that with regard to the mandatory vaccines that are in 36-787, the governor if you refuse the vaccine, the governor in this statute may send out law enforcement or the National Guard to enforce the vaccine order. Send it out to you. It's astounding.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, do you think you could turn down the speaker? We're picking up a little feedback, like when I talk.
Sure. Yeah.
Let's see how that works.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Okay. A little technical stuff, So,
Yes.
yeah. So grandma.
The governor may not be a doctor, but I'm not an internet guru either, obviously.
So the governor decides that grandma needs to not have so much heart medication because there's an emergency about the Wuhan virus, and he sends out the National Guard.
Yeah.
How is that in any way, protecting liberty or freedom at all?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? And it would be one thing, and I'm not even sure I'd be in agreement with, for instance, rationing hydroxychloroquine, which is what one would think in a Wuhan virus state of emergency, but to go further, as you're saying, with heart medication or pain medication or what have you, that's the question, isn't it? How is that protecting the state? And you've got me on that one.
Yeah, I maybe somebody has an answer to that. I kind of doubt it unless they're really want to be total government people. But so I imagine, I imagine you've shared some of these things with others, and what have they said, or were they aware of it? Were they not aware of it? Did they just brush it off?
Well, no, frankly, none of us were aware of this. My section leaders were as baffled by this and astounded, frankly, as I was. Our membership was not aware of it. There's a couple in the area in which I live. I have a couple good friends that are attorneys, and they could not believe it. They could not believe that this was, and not just because of what I've covered so far, but the fact that it's so utterly open-ended. As I progress here, you'll see that there are absolutely no checks and balances whatsoever. The kind of thing that you would expect in legislation, where you have perhaps, let's say, time constraints, or you have constraints on the degree of power that's exuded, or those things are typically, in good legislation, are typically spelled out, and they are not in this legislation at all anywhere.
So yeah, that's a big problem. I don't know, whatever you want to call it, but
Michael, could I ask you a question?
Yeah, go right ahead.
What is your answer to those who say that in an emergency situation, such as a infectious disease going around, how are you going to protect the citizens without doing something like this?
Well, that's a good question. Every situation like that is going to be a case-by-case situation, isn't it? Because it depends on what the situation or what the emergency is. For instance, if it's a virus like we're in right now, that's different than, say, some sort of a major gas main explosion or something, where there's harmful chemicals being disseminated that way. So it really depends on the situation. But the answer is not the obfuscation of people's rights. The answer is not just this blanket, in some cases unending until the governor rather says, okay, we're done. As a matter of fact, right now, and I hope I'm answering your question directly, but right now we have a bill in our legislature that ends the state of emergency. So we have a myriad of legislators there that put this bill in that believe, okay, we're done with this. It's been a year almost. And there is no indication from the governor's office that he has any inclination to end this, you know. So it's really a case-by-case circumstance, and you know, the provision is there for government agencies to act when needed, depending upon what the situation is. But to broad brush it with a statute like this, with no limitations, no checks and balances, that is a clear violation of the Constitution, is not the answer.
Yeah, that's certainly I've seen that situation play out where they just keep on extending it, and it's you've probably seen Lord of the Rings, right? Well, some of you have. Some people have. And there's a scene there where somebody had an opportunity to throw that ring, which represents total power, into the abyss, and he didn't. He says, it's too tempting, right? So once you have that absolute power, very, very difficult to let go of that.
Right. Yeah, and yeah, that's absolutely right. And you know, I've never seen a piece of good legislation that doesn't have checks and balances. You know, and it's as far as what's in statute 36-787 and New Mexico 1978. You know, just the fact that there's scary stuff in there, in my opinion, is bad enough. But then when there's no ending to it, there's nothing in there, and you have to have an act of the legislature to say, you know what, the governor's not doing anything about this, we're going to step in here. I mean, the legislature doesn't do anything quick. You know, it's my experience, and it's astounding that we've gotten to the point in this state where I believe it's 1001 is the bill to end the state of emergency here, and it's amazing that we've gotten to this point where the legislature has now had to step in to fill in where there is no check or balance.
So another question, Michael, would I be off base if I were to say, under the Constitution, everyone has the right as well as the responsibility to assess the risks of society and their lives, and the right to decide how they're going to respond to that risk? And am I off base there? Is there anything in the Constitution that gives the government the right to tell me how to assess the risks of health or anything else?
No, I think you're spot on, and of course, in many people, one of the first things that they think of when you bring up the U.S. Constitution is personal liberty and responsibility, and so no, I think you're spot on there, and you know, we've heard for many years now, my body, my choice, right, and with regard to the abortion argument, and I've been struggling to understand the differentiation between that slogan with abortion and with you or me or anyone else receiving a vaccine. I'm not anti-vax. That's not what this is about. This is about me making the decision, as you say, whether I want the vaccine or not. I don't need someone in Phoenix telling me or bringing a needle up to me and saying, here you go. That's my decision. So Harold, I can't agree with you more. I think you're spot on there.
Could I ask a question? Can you hear me?
Yes.
What are the members of the John Birch Society in Arizona doing to combat or possibly doing away with 36-787?
Well, that's a great question, and you must have a working crystal ball there because you were somehow able to read my mind. Before I answer that, one other thing I wanted to mention under this statute, and again, this is very, very similar, if not exact, to New Mexico 1978, is that if you were to refuse the law enforcement or National Guard urging, we'll say you, to receive the vaccine, in 36-787, the governor has the supposed authority to quarantine that person at a facility of the governor's choosing for any length of time the governor chooses. So now we're going, Eldon, one step beyond once again. We're completely obfuscating the due process rights of citizens with this statute. It's mind-boggling in its unconstitutionality. So to answer, I believe that was Donna, to answer Donna's question, in Arizona and New Mexico, we've made this in what we call in the John Birch Society an action item. The first thing that we did is that members called, wrote letters, emailed state legislators, not asking but politely demanding the rescission of this statute, 36-787, and we've been doing that to a lesser degree in New Mexico as well. Over a period of 3 or 4 months, we obtained 7 legislators in the state of Arizona with us that stated that they would help craft a bill to rescind the statute, not to fix it, or try to fix it, not to change the wording, nothing like that, but it's bad legislation. There are no checks and balances. It needs to be gone. And they agreed to that. Section leaders, members, and myself have had private calls and meetings with various state legislators to support this effort. During one of those calls, I read the specific wording of statute 36-787 that addresses the forced vax and medication rationing to a legislator. And when I finished reading it, his immediate response, the one thing he said was, "That's scary." That was the response he had. He had never heard of 36-787. It's unconstitutional provisions prior to the JBS and our phone call. He further responded to me that I will absolutely help in getting this statute repealed. So there we are. From never hearing about the statute to a commitment for rescission of the bill or of the statute in one phone call. It's important for people, not just the John Birch Society members, but it's for everyone. It's important to know that your legislators don't necessarily know about unconstitutional statutes, resolutions, or laws in your state. Some of them, I think we know all too well, I'm sorry to say, don't even know the full wording on current bills that are before them or current statutes that they're voting on. So, they rely on us. They rely on their constituents to contact them and make them aware of what we want them to do, or in maybe more cases, not to do. So that's, to answer your question, that's where we're at right now. We've got a meeting. We've got 2 meetings with 2 different legislators in about the coming week with myself and with members that are getting updates on these statutes. So in addition to making them aware and letting them know matter-of-factly what your stance is on any particular given issue, it's important to follow up if you can. I mean, people are busy, people have families, and I realize all that, but we are talking about the Republic, and we're talking about unconstitutional laws that shouldn't exist. So that's pretty important. And it important that you or perhaps someone, if you're working in a group on something like this, that someone in your group follows up with these legislators to find out what the status is.
Sounds like making appointments, learning about things yourself, educating yourself, and then educating others, and then organizing.
Well, right, and that's you know, in the John Birch Society, that's what's so wonderful about the JBS is that we have. You're talking about organizing and things like that. We're a boots on the ground network. We're an action network, and so you know, when we come across unconstitutional issues like this, we're ready to go. And we have as I say, boots on the ground that can contact legislators almost immediately in regards to this sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Now, Mike, you mentioned something I think previously that there's a statute in other states or something like
yes.
that. You were able to find it?
Yes, that's right. For instance, in Utah, you have Utah Title 36. And now let me, the caveat here is that I'm a coordinator for the JBS for Arizona and New Mexico, and I'm best versed there, of course. But you know, there were cursory things that we were able to find out, and in Utah, you have Title 36, which a lot of these provisions are in that Title 36, and you folks in Utah. You know, I would think if you agree with one or more of these issues, that's something I would think you would want to call your legislators about and not ask, but politely demand that, you know, you want these types of provisions repealed. I believe, Eldon, also there's one in Nevada, but unfortunately, at the moment, I can't recall what that statute or what that law is titled as. But if memory serves, there's one in Nevada as well.
Probably is. I've heard that their governor is pretty strict on these things. He's decided that he's king and all that fun stuff. But we know that he's not king. But we'll have to do some digging for Nevada. But thank you. Yeah, we'll have to read up on Title 36 in Utah. Everybody that lives in Utah, I'm actually just across the border in Wyoming. Our governor has decided that you know, he's a Republican, but he's a fan of some of these things. He's not exactly this freedom-loving guy. It seems like we found out pretty quick. So that's
well, yeah. It's you know, again, we're not talking party here. You know, we're talking we're talking constitutionality. We're talking about Mr. and Mrs. Democrat. If you're viewing this, we're talking about your rights here. Mr. and Mrs. Republican, if you're watching this, we're talking about your rights. So, you know, I realize the party component and everything. I get that, but you know, that's not what we're talking about here. We want to contain unconstitutional laws. We want to protect the rights for the individual. And it matters not if you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, what have you. If even if you're in the Whig Party, you should support this. So if there's any of those left, you know. But yeah, we should all you know, have concern over this, no matter what your party affiliation is.
Yeah, very well put.
Could I ask another question?
It's your show, Eldon.
Yeah, of course, people can ask questions.
Well, given what happened with the stealing of the election in November and the total control now in the federal government given over to the Democrats, House of Representatives and US Senate and the presidency, what can the states do to rein in the federal government from taking more of our rights away? Because if they proceed, we are going to lose all of our rights, and it won't matter what the state statute says. We won't have anything. And perhaps, can we fight back through nullification?
Is that for you, Alden, or is that for me?
Oh, I thought it was for you, but
Oh, okay.
I put my stamp of approval on nullification as the founders described it, not as some of these demagogues like to portray it. We just had a bill in South Dakota that was for forming a committee to evaluate the constitutionality of federal actions and decide whether or not to prohibit state employees from implementing those. That's well within. If a state is sovereign at all, shouldn't they have the ability to control the work requirements of state employees? Of course, and that's been upheld by the courts as well. It's called anti-commandeering doctrine, but it is a form of nullification. It's a very simple one. But didn't mean to steal your comment. Maybe you had something else, of course, on that.
Well, no, I concur with you, of course. And I think the only thing I would add is that nullification isn't an agenda, as is portrayed by people that have a lack of standing or that perhaps have their own agenda. Not that that ever happens, of course. Mm-hmm. But nullification is not an agenda. It's a process. And that's exactly right. The states are guaranteed that process, the process of nullification in the Constitution. And yes, if a state or if the individuals in that state are being put upon by, there's a term I want to use. I was going to say federal overlords, but but by the federal government, if their state or the individuals are being put upon by by an edict or by a law that comes down from Washington, D.C., that is precisely right. That is put in there for that state and for that citizenry's protection. And that's a guarantee that we have. So again, it's not an agenda, it's a process, and every state has that, is guaranteed that right. So you're absolutely correct on that.
Yeah, good question.
Absolutely.
I don't know if we should transfer, we talked about possibly going into the election integrity. I don't know if you want to go into that at this point, or if we want to go more into what people can do about the pushing back on the mandates. But we got a good start on that, I think, at least. Right. Congratulations, by the way, to getting it this far in Arizona. That's really admirable that you were able to mobilize.
On behalf of all of the JBS membership that has worked so hard on it, I will say thank you on behalf of all of them. And
it doesn't happen by one person. That's right.
Amen. Amen. And we can get into some of the election stuff. I'm loaded for bear here. I'm ready to go. If I've got my coffee, you could have me here all day. So
okay. Well, yeah. So let's talk about the election integrity type of stuff. That's certainly a big concern on many people's minds. What can the average person do about making sure that our elections are secure, that we have confidence that when we cast a vote that it's actually counted, that somebody else didn't vote for us, that dead people aren't coming out of the grave and voting somehow? What do we do? What's your thought on that?
There's two things for me that immediately come to mind with a question like that. Is the first one, once again, let's go back to contacting your legislators. They don't have crystal balls. They don't have, they're not mind readers. And so unless you contact them, how are they to know where you stand? And so with regard to election reform, it's important that you, and in an unequivocal way, let your legislators know where you stand. The second part of that is to identify yourself with perhaps a group that has the same concern, so that you can, there's empowerment through numbers. And of course, naturally to me, the group that I think of is the John Birch Society. And we talked about this briefly, but in answer to this question too, I want to reiterate that you know, it's not just a place to go gripe, if you'll pardon me for saying that, but it's the John Birch Society is an action network. We have boots on the ground, so you have a system there to which you can take these concerns, you can formulate your plan of action, and then you can go to the legislators, to the governor, to the Secretary of State as a cohesive unit and say, look, we're displeased with this, or we need this to happen. And you're in a group, in an empowered group that people take notice of. And I can tell you that most certainly with the actions that we've gotten on Statute 36 and with regard to election reform, we've gotten a lot of attention from the legislature. So what we decided to do, and this was early on, is we decided to come out with a 4-point plan or a 4-point agenda. And we kept it small and we kept it concise, Eldon, because whether we were on the phone with legislators, whether we were perhaps having John Birch Society chapter meetings, whether we were at a rally and we were talking to fellow patriots, we wanted something that was clear-cut and concise that we could share quickly. If we wanted to, we could have made it a 16-point white paper, you know. But the 4 things that we touched on that we demand is in-person voting, voting day, not voting week, because we've seen what's happened by extending the voting now. All the, you know, ballots that you know, aren't certified. I don't need to review this whole thing. Everybody lived just as I did, right? The third thing is GOP and Democrat Party representatives present at an appropriate range to view the vote counting. And the fourth item is ballots counted in the precincts in which they are cast. No more, tabulators. No more sending votes off to God only knows where, to Washington, D.C. or Europe or wherever. The ballots are to be counted in the precincts in which they were cast. So that's our 4-point program. Now, after we put that together, we found out that we have some astute legislators, particularly in Arizona, that were right with us. One of the legislators that I spoke with personally already has a bill ready with those 4 points in them. So that's not a lot of work, is it? I mean, for those of you that are watching this and thinking, oh my gosh, as if I've got my job, I've got the kids on the weekend, I don't have time for all this. One phone call, showed me that a legislator already had all of our points in there. And so thereby you could, even if you're watching television one night or whatever, you could have your laptop on and you could be sending emails to the legislator saying, I support this legislation. I support this bill. It didn't turn out to be a long, arduous thing of getting a bill put together. We found out a legislator already had one ready to go. So that really makes the job much easier. And we wouldn't have known that, of course, without a little engagement, though.
That's right. Well, it sounds like, in a way, it's good marketing, because I know we just got this article and front page of the New American, right? The feature article, and it had a long list of things that should be done to change things. But if you kind of break it down at least to the real high priority stuff, and people can latch onto that. And so it's not like Woodrow Wilson's 14 points or something that's right a little tougher to review and to memorize. This is pretty good.
You're not going to let me. You're not going to get me started on Woodrow Wilson, are you?
No, it's just our daughter. She's in Freedom Project Academy, so we just read together about the Versailles Treaty, and I was helping her understand that. So that just been on my mind lately. I'm trying to explain to her.
Eldon, could I make a comment that you made a statement about marketing, part of the marketing, and I really like the title of Restoring Election Integrity because it sends a message. It's almost like I can't imagine that this really happened, but every mainline news says the same exact words: unbased, unsubstantiated claims or unbased claims. That's in everything you see. I don't know how it got to all the way around everybody, but somehow it did. Well, this is a message that implies that there is a restoration needed. And so we're somewhat countering that unsubstantiated claims by the title. I think we ought to use that a lot in what I think that's even better than election reform. I think it should be restoring something that was lost. So it's just my observation. I thought it was a brilliant name that the John Birch Society chose.
Yeah, I think it's very uplifting. We've had many campaigns, stop this, stop that. Of course, it's nice to be for something, and election integrity is something much more tangible than, say, reform. Well, reform what? That could be virtually anything when you talk about reform, but election integrity certainly means something that restoring that means we've deviated from that. And a lot of, I think, like you said, Mike, many of the legislators don't know how far and how, over time, last decades, we've deviated from real election integrity in the name of convenience, many times outsold.
Yep, that's correct. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I suppose it would take, each state is a little different as to what laws they've adopted to make their elections susceptible to fraud and corruption. So that might take a little bit of investigation, but have you found something that's really common among different states that they need to correct that's causing big issues?
Well, yes, certainly. I think, as you just alluded to, the extension of the time frame where, and even in this last election, we saw votes being admitted and tabulated after the cutoff date. I mean, you've already got, in some cases, 3, 4, 5 days a week, 2 weeks. I mean, and so, and then you have what should be non-viable votes because they're not in at the appropriate time being counted. And of course, that opens the whole thing up to corruption, incredibly. I mean, I can explain that more if need be. I don't think I need to. I think most people know what I mean by that. But so I think certainly the time frame is a big issue. And if you recall, we used to never have these problems, did we?
Right.
I mean, when we were voting with an absentee, for instance, I was involved in a car accident, for instance. I had someone pull out in front of me from a parking lot. And in that kind of a situation, I would have had to vote absentee. And that is understandable. One, for as long as I've been alive, which is more years than I care to think of, but you've been able to obtain an absentee ballot, and you just give them the reason why you need the ballot, and you get it. And so this and we didn't have those problems then. It was a legitimate set out process that everyone knew, everyone was aware of, and it worked. And now this whole thing, oh, gee whiz, you know, we've got to give people a week, 2 weeks, blah, 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 to get to the, you know, and mail-in ballots. And it's just, and we see you know, we were counting ballots for days, for a week more, you know, and we never used to have that. You know, we're supposed to be a more, you know, technologically advanced, enlightened country now, and here we're back to you know, voting like we're in a third world country. So, and I don't see this as being, once again, forgive me, but I don't see this as being Republican or Democrat. You know,
Yeah, that's right.
you know, corruption is corruption, and taking weeks to count ballots is ridiculous. If you're a Republican, if you're a Democrat, if you're an independent, you want your vote to count, and you don't want it to be canceled out by someone else's vote who came in after the deadline and may or may not be legitimate.
Could I ask a question?
Yep. That's the way.
So, Mike, what do you think we should do about voting machines?
Well, as our 4-point manifesto or proviso states, we want voting by hand, counted by hand, with Republicans and Democrats present. No machine tabulation, no machine voting. When I found out almost right after the election, it seemed that news reports were saying that the voting machines were connected to the internet. You know, I had the same response then that I have now. I mean, you see me closing my eyes and shaking my head because it's unbelievable that kind of thing would be allowed in the United States of America. You know, so you know, again, voting machines and all of this was supposed to help us. It was supposed to aid us in getting the votes counted faster, so on and so forth. We have seen the exact opposite. So let's do what we know works. Let's count the votes by hand. Let's have them tabulated election night, and we know who's elected, and no more of this, you know, chicanery.
I'm just bringing up some of the resources we
I
have
see that.
online, and it's building. We've got some reprints and also Slim Jims. It looks like we're going to have a booklet. I don't know about a video if that's in the works, hopefully, but so lots of things that our members and activists can use on this. I've got a little story actually on this. We just moved to Wyoming from Montana, and we said, okay, we should register to vote. So I went down to the county courthouse, talked with the lady, and she said, can you show me some ID? I said, okay. So I pulled out my Montana driver's license, and she looked at that and she accepted it, and that was it. She didn't say, you know, can you show me a utility bill that you actually live here or anything like that. I actually had to give more identification to get a library card than I did to get to register to vote. To me, that was pretty alarming. So, you know, makes you wonder, well, how many people are voting in Wyoming? That in Wyoming's a very small population state. How many people came over from Colorado or Utah or you know, Montana? I don't know, to vote in Wyoming. And people just said, and we have same day registration here too. You could just drive over the border and say, well, I live in Wyoming. I want to vote. And you wouldn't even have to give a Wyoming identification. Just alarming how lax it's become, even in a place like Wyoming.
Yeah, you need, if it seems as though you need more documentation if you're going to open a pet grooming facility than if you're going to cast a vote for the president of the United States anymore. It's I agree with you. It's stunning.
Yeah, very much so. So we have various resources, I would certainly recommend folks go to jbs.org/vote, and you can learn all about that. You can send messages to your state lawmakers, to your federal lawmakers. There's a list of, let's see, problems and solutions. So specifically explaining why some of these things, like the Motor Voter Act, the Help America Vote Act, those are federal acts. What should we do about that? Reinstating precincts, like you talked about, right, Mike? So explains all
Yes.
that, and we can point others to this. And I think there's some real possibilities. A lot of people concerned about this issue. We had a comment on the chat. Let me make sure. No.
Yes, I think the Stop the Steal rallies illustrated your last point there, Eldon. Yes, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people are really alarmed at what happened. And Mike, how do you think we can reach those people? They're very alarmed. They think like us to have election integrity, but they don't know about the John Birch Society, and they're just kind of one person out there. After the rally's over, they all go home. So what can we do to help get more people involved?
Well, there are things that coordinators like Eldon and myself are doing. I've heard up around I think it's Eastern Washington or Idaho there that they are using the tried and true method of things like billboards. Here in Arizona, we have 2 radio stations that are playing John Birch Society PSAs, public service addresses, on the stations. I'll tell you something though. I think one of our, right now anyway, one of our most powerful tools is one thing that you mentioned actually, and that is the rallies. Patriots are going to these rallies. They're concerned about what they have seen, what they have heard about the election integrity issue, and they're going there to let people know that. But moreover, they're also going there to talk with other patriots and try to come up with ideas and solutions and find out what answers there are. I know in my region, we have I guess I don't know what you would call it, sort of an action, a sort of a immediate action team, I guess. We call them go teams here. And our go teams are ready, and they can be ready to go to a rally that even springs up organically within a half an hour. And I can tell you that our go teams have been very effective indeed in answering some of these questions for people and directing them toward the right answer right there at the rally, whether it's contacting their legislators or giving them the information on who their legislators are, or even becoming members of the John Birch Society. So we've increased our membership by quite a bit through our go teams and our efforts by attending rallies and passing out information. Very often when we are engaged with somebody, we'll have, as Eldon said, a Slim Jim, which is just a small informational flyer, if you will, that we can give to them that gives them the answer or a partial answer to what they're looking for. So we're all here on Zoom right now, and it's working out tremendously. It's a tried and true method, and the radio spots and the billboards. But in answer to your question, I think that it's going to be a long time before face-to-face, belly-to-belly communication is ineffective. I think that is still to this day, whether you're going to rallies or fairs, or you're going to parades or gun shows or whatever it is you're going to, that personal interaction, you're not. I can't think of anything more effective than that.
Yeah, definitely. And on these Slim Jims, you see there's kind of a blank space on the back. if you want, you could put envelope sticker or even write it on there by hand, your contact information, maybe an email address or a phone number where they can get back to you. They're very inexpensive. You notice it's $3 for a pack of 25. If you order 5 of them, it's $2 for each packet. So it's, you know, that's very affordable and great for using to pass out to just people at these rallies. A bullet point thing, it doesn't go so much into detail. Very, very good tool.
Yeah, absolutely. Because people are busy at these rallies, and you know, it's not like attending a lecture. You run into people. You've got, you know, you're doing things, they're doing things. You've got so long to talk to them, and you're absolutely right. A Slim Jim is a perfect way to communicate.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, we're kind of running up against the hour. Any other questions for Mr. Kosters?
Mister, wow.
Well,
Thank you, Alden.
you know, yeah, haven't been knighted yet, I suppose. We can't call you Sir Koster.
I think that's going to be a long time coming.
No, no. Okay, maybe not. All right. Well, so glad that everybody could be on today. Real good discussion. We covered 2 big issues of the election integrity and also pushing back on these mandates that have been pushed in the name of public health and public safety. Hopefully, if you listen to this or if you watch this, you got some ideas. What can we do about this, right? Try to organize with others. Share this video, like it, subscribe, comment if you see it on YouTube and all that. This is something that is very important to our liberties. If we let these things slide, it's very difficult to get our freedom back, because if we don't have election integrity, if we just let the governors decide that they're king and let that slide, well, it's difficult to say that we really have a republic anymore. We've got to be taking action and making a difference. And I think Mike has shown pretty well that all of us can make a difference, even if it's just a few. So thank you so much for sharing your time with us, Mike, sharing with us this experience, and hopefully we can spread the word, and it can inspire others to also take action too.
Well, thank you for having me, Alden. I enjoyed it and I appreciate it.
Yes, sir. It's been fun. So, you know, maybe you'll be on another time. Certainly be welcome to. Glad everybody could join us on. There we go, on Birching the West, and I guess we'll catch you all next time. Okay.